Hello, welcome to the National Parents Union Nightly Restorative Check-in. I am your host, Marisol Quevedo Rerucha, and today is Monday, February 8th. Thank you for being with us as always. And a couple of announcements. We finally have the date for our next National Town Hall. It will be on February 18th. So please make sure and register. We're going to have Tamika Mallory, who is one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, who will be joining the conversation. We'll also have the results of our national poll. So please make sure to go to our National Parents Union website and please register. It's going to be phenomenal. So with that, let me introduce myself. I am Marisol Quevedo Rerucha. I am the mother to Camerina, who is going to turn 27 years old this year. I am the mother to Emilia, who will be 26 and who will be giving birth to her third baby on February 18th, the night of the town hall, a little boy. And I'm the mother to Sofia, who is 15 years old and a sophomore at our local performing arts school. I am the daughter to Irma Castro and Abraham Quevedo. I am the grandmother to Isabela Luna and Cynthia Iliana, and again, our soon-to-be grandbaby, our grandson. And I am also the very proud granddaughter of Camerina Rodriguez from Gomez Palacio, Durango, Alejandro Castro from Baja California, Francisco Quevedo, and Carmen Bedoya, both from Sonora. And as always, I give just a little explanation of my introduction. First, I want to say that it grounds me to remind myself where I come from, who I stand with, and who's coming after me. And I invite all of you to think about that whenever you enter a space, whether it be a virtual space, whether it be, a meeting, a room, that you think about who has poured into you, who has cared for you, who has challenged you, who really has even prayed for you, and think about those that you care for and you think about for the future and whose voices you represent. And it's always a reminder to me that this work, my voice isn't just about me. It's so much more. My responsibility is bigger than just my voice. And so not about my ghettos, it's about our community. And for me, it's also about my family. So with that, we're going to move into our breathing technique. So we use what is called the 4-7-8 breathing technique. So we inhale for 4 seconds, we hold for 7, and we release for 8. And I will lead us through this as I always do. And we will repeat that 4 times. So your job is to breathe. So if at any time, if the breathing, it gets hard, it just isn't feeling right, just go to your regular pattern and then join us on the next round, because we do this 4 times. This technique was taught to us by Dr. Anjali in the very early days of this show back in March. She was one of my first guests, and she now hosts this show on Fridays. So please make sure that you watch her show, but also use this technique. It helps relax you, it helps you refocus, and it's great for transitioning. So let's go ahead and get started. You could place your feet firmly on the ground. If you'd like to close your eyes. And as your feet are connected to the ground, just imagine them connecting to the earth below, the foundation of your house. And just take a regular breath in and release. And inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you. Please use that. I've shared before that I like to use that technique when I go to sleep at night. Sometimes if I wake up in the middle of the night for whatever reason, it helps me to really relax and go back to sleep. But also, as I mentioned earlier, it's a great technique to use for transitions. So with that, I'm going to bring my guest on tonight, Trent Day Hall, and let me switch us. Hello, Trent.
Hey, it's good to see you. Good to see you. Good to hear you as well.
Oh, I'm so happy to be with you. So, I'm going to have you introduce yourself. And I know that you are somebody who is super, super busy. But so I didn't get a chance to be able to like share all of the amazing work that you do. But really, like, please introduce yourself in whatever way feels right. You can talk about your work. You can talk about your family. You can talk about your challenges, anything that you want, the things that you love, the things that you might not love so much, however you would like to introduce yourself to us.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I appreciate this platform first and foremost. I want to say that. So for everyone, hello, my name is Trent Day Hall. Honestly, there's a lot of different things. So I appreciate you giving me the space to kind of go off on a tangent. But I would say that the things that I feel mostly connected to that I think are really important for us to talk about are simply being an empath, being someone who leans on effective communication and wants to teach people effective communication. I'm a Black male. I exist in a space as a Black man, and I'm learning how to navigate that every day and helping other people who have the same experience as me, different experiences as me, understand what that is and what that looks like, essentially so that we can understand unified dignity. And the main underlining thing that I would say I tend to focus on and try to focus on is just understanding the true essence of humanity. And so there are a lot of ways in which I go about that in my work, mainly effective communication. I'm a facilitator by trade as well as a sociologist. So I understand a lot of the invisible strings, the weird things that kind of make us move that we're not privy to, that we don't understand. And there are still a lot of things that I don't know that I don't know. However, being someone who loves to learn, loves to teach and just go on a journey of learning with people, it's something that I found myself falling into and being lucky that I can actually do it as something and make a living, and actually people find it very real, life altering. A lot of the skills that I have the honor of teaching are not just skills that would help you, whether it be within a school community, a government system, nonprofit. They're human skills. They're things that teach you how to effectively communicate with your loved ones better, understand yourself so that you can extend whatever it is that you want to extend outside of yourself. Love, understanding, trust, all of these things that are important that tend to hinder us from being where we really need to be. Especially the last year that we've had in particular. And I think that's just a microcosm of what's been underneath the surface, but it's been bubbling and bubbling. And there have been a lot of ways that discourse has turned into very ineffective ways of people trying to understand one another, figure out what life is, and also people screaming for their dignity to be honored in the middle of all of that. And so being a person that can kind of see all of these things, I've been in a lot of different experiences. I've worked in a lot of different spaces where I've had to be connected to a lot of different things and trying to interpret them. I feel honored to have the space to be able to impact things in that way. And so my job, my main job is working for Howard County government as in the Office of Human Rights as the community outreach supervisor. A whole bunch of fancy words for essentially make sure that the people in that community have access to the resources that they need within the realm of living their best life, making sure that their dignity is honored. I'm on kind of like that preemptive front facing side where it's the outreach portion, but we also have investigators in the office. And so from the investigator side, that's where if unfortunate things happen, they make sure that they go through and they actually do mediation as opposed to what you might think of first. So it's bringing all parties or both parties to the table and trying to figure out, is this something that we can truly say is, a violation of your humanity? in connection to your identity marker. And so beyond that, it's then figuring out, okay, so what is the next step? It's not specifically like legal counseling because they're not legally representing someone. However, it's a way for us to understand what's going on. We have hate bias incidents that we actually collect as well. And we try to make sure that we're connecting to the right people that we need to. Because if we're getting some consistently from one department or from one space, then it's obvious that something is going on, something's not working. And so a lot of my job, where I prefer the one-on-one person teaching and stuff, I've ventured into the realm within the last 5 years of understanding how systems work from like the fundamental level. And I don't really like structure. I will say that I tend to be more of a free-form person. I like to let things organically develop, but I understand through these last 5 years the importance of it. I've understood what I feel like I'm starting to need to in order to actually change some of the mechanisms in the systems that are stagnant, that we unfortunately don't really have the language, or people might not be recognizing, especially those gatekeepers that are actually causing more harm than good. And so that's what I would say within that realm of the Office of Human Rights. Again, facilitator and sociologist by trade. So there are a lot of presentations and trainings I do specifically around dignity, around student voice, around effective communication. I've also had the opportunity to be trained in the Undesign the Red Line tour, which is a tour traveling exhibit that breaks down the understanding of why we are at the place that we are at now in terms of demographics and the intersectionality of identity, and particularly Black people and minority individuals. And then how did that happen from a historical standpoint? So understanding the Great Migration, understanding that even when people were fleeing persecution in the South, they were essentially moving into a different type of persecution where they were in economic and resource deserts, where things were intentionally set up so that they couldn't have things. And so I've been blessed to be trained in this exhibit that breaks this down. And I'm currently in Baltimore, and I've lived in Baltimore for a while. And Baltimore is one of the central hubs where redlining started. And so understanding, when you walk out or when you go to the harbor and the difference between two streets versus this street, or when you have people not wanting certain kids to go to their school, you start to really understand how all of these things are interconnected. And so it's important for me as a vessel, as a person who doesn't really have that much trouble understanding, because I went through a lot, and I have went through my trials and tribulations, my anger, all of my stages. But I feel that I'm at a place now where I can truly understand things fundamentally different than those around me. And I have a duty to try to get people to understand that, to give them the tools and the mechanisms to come to their own understanding, and to not necessarily impart anything to anyone, which I know that could kind of sound a little bit weird. And then also from a consulting standpoint, there's a way that I like to travel. I like to make sure that the skills, the things that I'm talking about, that I can expand on them, because again, I don't like structure, but when you're within a certain realm or within a certain job, you have a task that you're supposed to do. There are a lot of things that I understand that need to happen within the realm of honoring people's humanity, within the realm of equity, that I can't do if I'm pigeonholed into my job. And so I try to make sure that I have time outside of my job to do things that I feel connected to make sure I'm expanding the talents that I have. And also just in a way of, it's hard out here for someone who is doing things for human services. Human services peeps do not get paid a lot of money. And so trying to figure out how do I stay true to myself while also making a living is hard, but like being able to take the talents, the things I'm able to do, and that people are willing to say, that is valuable enough for us to be able to fund it, and for us to bring you continually back here to teach a cohort, to teach a community these skills that you're talking about are really beautiful. I feel very appreciative, and it's put me in a different space than how I grew up, which was in a very different socioeconomic status than what I'd say right now. And I'm still broke, which is like crazy to think about when I try to think about how my mom made things happen on a shoestring, bubble gum, and paperclip diet. But like, it's just, or budget rather. But I feel like I can continue to tangent, but I feel like I got my 3 windows of things in terms of like my jobs that I would say I'm leaning into. In terms of who I am, I'm a very, very open, transparent person, unapologetically myself. It's taken a lot of time to get there. A lot of the things that I was talking about, I'm never teaching anything or doing anything that I am not willing to do myself. And so there's a lot of vulnerability that's gone behind the work that I'm talking about that I also continue to lean into and exercise, because you can't continue to understand these concepts, to grow these concepts, if you're not willing to put yourself through that process. And so I revel in the ability to be vulnerable now, which is one thing that I used to hide away from. I'm an only child. I do have a half brother that I recently got a chance to meet, actually on my 30th birthday. But for the most part, I grew up alone. My mom didn't have any more children. My parents weren't together. And so through that process, I got to understand a lot of different things also, just about how humans and family structures work. And that kind of jump-started my reasoning for wanting to lean in and understand and be there for people who are my age, kids who look like me, who might not have had a male figure, to actually, hey, I see you, I understand you, or I'm seeking to understand you, and I want to hear you. And that's all I think a lot of kids need, a lot of people, individuals need. But if you can do it at an early level, it matters. And my mom definitely did that to the degree that she could. And I'd say that that's why I am the person that I am. She really fundamentally, genuinely listened to me, affirmed who I was as a person. And I took those skills, I took those things that I saw my mom do. And our parents are human, and I understood how I could try to be better. My mom continually told me that I was supposed to be a better version than her. And I took that to heart. And it's the same for my 9-year-old son. I want him to be better than I am. I want any other child or any other person that I interact with to be better than I am in my current state.
Thank you so much for everything that you shared. And I think one of the things that I just really connected with and appreciate is how, like, right off the bat, the first way that you described yourself is as an empath. And as somebody, so as empaths, like they intrinsically, right, like they're almost born to experience other people, and to experience and be able to feel what other people are feeling. And I'm wondering, with all of the work that you're doing, because the work that you're doing requires a lot of giving. There's a lot of giving of your expertise. There's a lot of giving of yourself. Like you said, like you revel in vulnerability. Being vulnerable is a gift. Sharing a part of yourself with somebody like that is a gift. And so how do you take care of yourself with all of this work? Because every single thing from working, in the Office of Human Rights, in social service, from consulting, the work that you do with students, like really focusing on student voice, the work that you're doing with the Red Line Tour, being a father, all of this, there's a lot of giving. So how do you take care of yourself?
It's a really good question. I probably should. This is one of those come to Jesus moments, or come to whatever deity you worship moments, because I don't actually take care of myself as well as I should. And so one thing that's really interesting is I recognize that I'm good at giving advice or recognizing what's happening for other people, the empath in me. Hey, I can see that you're probably tired, that you should give yourself more grace in this, or whatever the case may be. And for myself, I don't really take my own advice. And that's one thing I genuinely am working on. I'm genuinely working on that, because I feel like there's always, I'm always forgetting something, or there's always something else that I can do. And so I've become kind of like workaholic in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it also is not it's a lot easier to convince yourself that you should do it when it's in service of someone else, or it's helping someone else. But I definitely, like I said in the beginning, and I continually need to tell myself this. So this is a reminder that I can't extend something outside of myself unless I actually have it. And so the amount of energy that I put into things, the amount of vulnerability, it does recharge me in a way. And one of the main things that I will say to give a distinct answer to your question, I'm an introvert, and there are times where I just have to disappear. Like I don't want to really talk to anyone, and not in a way where it's like I don't want to hear anyone, but it's like, right, I've been thinking so much about the meta of how people are saying things, tone, language, the way someone's body language, especially when we were in person and I facilitated, like paying attention to a room of 10 people, paying attention to a room of 50 people, and you're facilitating them, and you're trying to make sure no one's causing any harm, and that everyone understands the values and guidelines, and that people are leaning into the vulnerability in the right way, and that you're giving enough vulnerability that's not too much, not too little, that people feel the rapport in the room or the relationship of trust that they have with you and one another. And like that in itself is recharging. But afterwards, it's like, okay, I need to sit by myself, kind of like away from other entities, because I can literally feel that energy from being an empath, and I just need to wash my palate. I need to clean my palate. Oftentimes, I'll listen to music alone. My dog is also a very good way for me to recharge, because she's always, I could leave the house for 5 minutes and come back and she's excited, like I left for 30 minutes.
Yeah. Or like you left for a day. So one of my one of my spiritual brothers, who I've learned so much from, so grateful for him, Pedro Terrazas, he's the one who told me, and when he told me, it took my breath away. And he's an educator, but he also is very involved in the indigenous church that he belongs to. And he's looked to for running, the church has been wanting to give him more responsibility, but he runs sweats. He doesn't run he doesn't run teepees yet. But anyway, one of the things he said is we work together on this book on restorative practices. It's coming out soon. And he said, we have no business going outside of the home and doing this work. If he put it on himself, he said, if my relationship with my wife is not okay, if my kids are not okay, if they're sick, or if the relationship with them is not okay, I have no business leaving my house to do any of this work. And that kind of hit me, because I definitely would describe myself as a workaholic, definitely somebody who is a giver, definitely somebody that charge that you explain, like that energy charge that you get. Absolutely. But that was a hard kind of thing to accept and realize. And so part of my wondering with you, Trent, is what is it that, what is that is not allowing you? Like, why is it that you have to make a big effort to take care of yourself? Because what you're talking about, there's this effort that you have to make.
Yeah. That's a really good question. So I think I think a lot of people would identify with what I'm going to say. Again, vulnerability. But there has been a large portion of my life, whether it be because of my skin, where I was at, how people responded to whatever other identity marker that I have, where I didn't have a lot of reinforcement besides like my mom home central base as to like, you're a good person, you're an awesome person. And so going through that process, there was always an outward need to essentially manifest who I was, but also to make sure that no one felt the way that I did. And so I've recognized, even before doing this work, there have been times where I've went out of my way, or I've recognized I can see that look in your eye, or I can literally feel how you're feeling in a room full of people when you still feel alone. And so when I recognized beyond like that, okay, so there are other people that feel the way that I feel. Okay, cool. And not only like because of experience, I'm talking about going to Penn State, someone with a completely different life than I had, still me recognizing that they feel the same exact way. Okay, so I get a greater understanding of the human plight from that standpoint. Then when I got introduced to sociology and the work and effective communication, it was, oh, this is a way for me to absolve myself of this poison. It's like self-poison that you're giving yourself. And so then when you figure out, okay, what's actually going on, some awareness of where my vulnerability actually lies and why it's there. Why am I vulnerable around these topics? What makes me feel X, Y, and Z? When I started to discover that for myself, I started to understand that this is a long process. This is me going through college and deciding that I'm going to do this. And there are so many different ways, like routes off, avenues where I could have just stopped, or I could have just been like, oh, I'm good. And when I recognized that it's important for someone to at least try to get people to understand the importance of this. I don't see very many people lean into the work that we do without taking things personal, without them having to be connected to an ego, without them having to be connected to, I'm only doing this for Black people, without them, like literally there are all these like different sectors and pockets. And like when I recognize the root cause of isms, of misunderstanding, of fear, of all this other stuff. And like that there are literal ways, like super simple ways that you can get people to understand it intuitively, and that they can have the language to articulate it. That things like taking care of home automatically happen, because now I know how to reflect back what I'm hearing. And if I'm not understanding something that you're saying, like now we're in a genuine dialogue. I'm listening to you because I care about what you're saying, or I'm curious to understand it. And being able to say, okay, that's awesome to do in work. That's awesome for students to do. But the inverse is learning how to do this as yourself first, learning how to do this at home, learning how to do this with your loved one, with your child, with your mom. And like that process, what I recognized is that we violate the dignity of our loved ones the most. And so once you're learning how to unlearn all of this weird stuff that hinders us from being able to just treat each other as humans, to speak our truth and allow others to tell us their truths and for them to coexist. I don't see many people my age doing that. And like I see more now. I think it's become more visible. But when I was in college, talking in 2008, I recognized that this is important. When I go back to Baltimore, there are a lot of people that need this type of work in order to shift out of where we're at, and there are a lot of people who don't care. And so if I take time off, if I am tired, then that's less people that are going to get exposed to this that can then understand something fundamental about themselves. And then like the space that we're creating together, that we share together, will change. And like, unfortunately, I do think about that often. Like when I sit down, or when I lay in bed, sometimes I'm like, all right, I need to check my email because I could have gotten something, or I might have missed something, or maybe I should reach out to this person, knowing that I'm tired. I actually should go to sleep. If I send this email, I might have a typo, but it's not being able to turn it off, because it does feel like a divine mission.
There, for some reason, the word sacrifice is coming to me. And I think that is something that you think of, like the revolutionaries, right? Who were really willing to sacrifice their lives for their cause or their community. And I think that some of the elders, especially in the social justice, civil rights movement, who I think that there is a lot of sacrifice of relationship, sacrifice of self, sacrifice of your physical self. And so what I do see, and I think social media helps me see it a little bit more, so you're in the millennial generation, correct?
Yes. Yes. I was born in 89. I think I'm right on the cusp of the millennial.
32-ish, 31, 32.
I turned 32 this year.
Yeah. So the people in that, I'll be 47 this year. So I think that age, like I see a lot more concerted effort of the realization of self. I think in a lot more concerted effort of that, also of like taking care of self and recognizing. But I think also, in the work of giving, really being intentional about our own healing and our own like restoration of health, our own care and feeding of ourselves. Because, and I think it was when you said, like, if you're not doing the work, then that's one less person that's out there. And really, like, the way you talk about yourself in your work, you're a light worker. So you're somebody that's doing light, right? You're doing the work of the light. And so there's one less light worker out there, like, and there's so much. But at the same time, like figuring out that balance, right? So that you can be, like you talked about, like the best dad that you can be. Because there's only one person that can be a parent to your child. Anybody else can do the work. They're not going to do the work the way you do. They're not going to be present the way that you are, but nobody else can be a dad to your child. Like all of the other, I think, except for like, there's very few places where that kind of the depth and the impact of that relationship, because in that, like, nobody can be you in any of the other spaces that you talked about, but nobody can parent your kid, can be your child's dad. And so I think, like in this work, how do you protect that and take care of that and take care of yourself so that you can be not just the best version of yourself and for him?
Honestly, I show him a lot of what I'm doing. And it's interesting. There's a lot of times where I know he understands, but it's like that kid, like, oh, okay. And they kind of like turn away. But like, I know he's starting to understand like some of the concepts. And so for me, like, when I'm with him 100%. There's time set aside intentionally. And those are my genuine breaks.
So beautiful.
But like, even that, it's, when I try to think of recharge when I'm with him, it doesn't even feel like it's a different existence. It's like it's not the same as Trent recharging himself.
Yeah.
I'm like just fully immersed in whatever me and him are doing. I'm not even thinking about anything else. And so when I'm doing work with students, when I'm doing effective communication work, or in particular when I'm talking about race and stuff, like I try to slowly get him to understand, hey, like, so I would love to spend as much time with you as I could. And also when I'm not spending time with you, this is what I'm doing. And breaking that down for him so that he has an understanding. Because when I was younger, I understood the concept of my mom having to work 2 or 3 jobs at a time. And like, I understood also that she was very tired. But like, as I'm older now, what would it look like if my mom would have just been like, you know what, I need to take care of myself. And like, not in a way to undermine anything, but genuinely like, and I think that as Black people, as a person that has grown up seeing someone just do what needs to be done, there's a lot of that that's ingrained in me. And so I am definitely making sure that I'm breaking cycles, like breaking trends. And one of those generational trends is I'm like trying to genuinely take care of myself, but it's an ongoing battle. It's something that I consistently have to tell myself and remind myself about. And hear and look when I'm talking to someone else and I'm like, yo, giving them advice and they genuinely take it and I see that they're shifting because of the advice, for them to tell me like, hey, thank you, that really helped me, that alters how I feel. It's like, I have to change now. I have to take this advice that I'm giving to someone else. Because I don't want to be hypocritical in that way, even though I think humans are just inherently hypocritical.
Yeah.
But also, if I'm trying to be the greatest version of myself, that's probably a piece of it.
So I want to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing at Howard County, because I think it's really beautiful that there's an Office of Human Rights. And so when you talked about, like the outreach and that there's mediations, is this instead of like having like these consequences? Is this part of when people talk about like defunding the police and fund social services? Is this a model that is trying to get into that space?
Yes and no. So I think that Howard County in general is moving, I think, rapidly to being a restorative space just in general. There are definitely restorative things that happen within the police department. There are restorative practices that happen within the court system. And then there are multiple different like groups that use dialogue and mediation as a means to disrupt conflict, unhealthy conflict. And so our office is specifically when there are things that could take legal action. And so if you're undermined within the confines of your job, within housing, things that are literally like your lived experiences, you take them to us. It's not like we are essentially, our investigators are asking you to pay. And there are people that I think don't know sometimes, okay, if I'm mistreated because of something fundamental about who I am, where can I go? And so you can, if it gets to a certain degree, if it's a hate crime, you can take it to the police. But like, again, a hate crime is very different than a hate bias incident. And a hate bias incident is when you're recognizing that your manager is promoting people that look different than you, but you're doing all of the work. And so, and you have some possible proof of that, or you are like recognizing that they speak to you differently than they speak to others, and it is connected to your identity or undermining your humanity. And so there are ways that mediation can solve that as opposed to whatever else route that people want to go down. And so a lot of times, again, it's that lack of understanding, fear, or misunderstanding. I didn't even recognize that was happening. Because again, bias, there's unconscious bias for people, and systems and people who are gatekeepers are no different than any other human being. And so there's the chance in those mediations sometimes for someone to just recognize what's going on, or for someone to say, actually, I wasn't even thinking that. And so maybe there's some other consensus we can come to, because what you were feeling is valid, but that might not be the truth of the situation. And those are also realities when we're talking about race, religion, gender, any aspect of intersectionality or identity, where you can undermine someone simply because you don't know, literally. And so from the mediation standpoint, when we're talking about like outward stuff, there's like the Mediation Conflict Resolution Center, which I'm a part of the board in that. And those are like a group of people who get deployed and are trained in restorative practices and in mediation. And so they do mediations with some of the juvenile detention center that's in the area. They do some with parents, like you can literally call in. They have like a card you can call in if you want mediation services, as opposed to doing something else. Now, in terms of that taking the place, because I think where you were going is that taking the place of possible crimes or punishments. I'm not sure where that is right now. Now, I do know that there has been more of a concerted effort, I think, within that youth realm to actually look at things differently, because there is disparities with SROs being in schools and students of color getting shifted into that prison school pipeline or school to prison pipeline. And so some of that restorative, like juju, can actually put a cog in that system. But the main thing that needs to happen is it needs to stop. Like, we recognize what's happening and that there are more SROs, in certain places than others, and that has demographic effect and not necessarily connected to crime rate. And so there are all these other things that are connected to it. But I think that one thing that the county is really trying to lean into is what restorative practices within all realms could look like, and then slowly rolling that out in different ways.
Well, and it needs to, I think, also just be pushed beyond the system regarding kids. And I think that the way, like with adults and beyond the government, like even in, like businesses, for-profit businesses, because what you're talking, all of the work that you're talking about, it's the work of humanity. And it's just that because of the way that society is that then like we get siphoned off right into all of the differences. And so then having to like find meaning and connection between the differences that we're reminded
constantly,
right? Like, so all the time exists. But I think it's really powerful that an entire county is really striving to look at this, at the way that they act in a different way, and the way that they respond to the community's needs, that there's actually a place. Like, imagine if all of our counties, like there's an issue, but we can call and get support with a mediation.
There's so this is more interesting than not, because so the work that I do, there's still a lot of blind spots. Howard County is an amazing space, but there's still so many blind spots where people don't know. Howard County got a AAA rating when they like rate counties of places to live at for the 24th year in a row. Part of that is because there's this place called Columbia, Maryland, that exists in Howard County. It was intentionally created to be the antithesis of these places that were created around redlining. So like your cities where you'll see like one really nice street, and then you go over 2 streets and then it's crazy, and then you recognize the demographics kind of match something, and it's communicating something in your head, and you're only
your doors. They cross the street and the doors get locked.
And something is happening in your brain, and you're only left to make one of 2 decisions. The people here are inherently worse than, or there's something going on that is causing people to have to be like this. And I don't think sometimes people don't get to the gravity of that conversation or that question for themselves. And so Howard County, Columbia, created for the specific purpose of interracial relationships and marriages being allowed, to be the antithesis of what things we're seeing in Maryland at the time, during that time period in the 1960s. And Jim Rouse was the person that created this vision. And so it was intentionally created for socioeconomic status, people of different races and religions to live in the same neighborhood. They created villages where intentionally, like, you had everything that you needed in your village: your grocery store, your school, but they were all like built around like this certain structure. And then Columbia was a huge circle. And so you have this really insular community that was intentionally made for equity that thrived. And then it basically built out what Howard County is as of now. So a lot of people, when you talk about Howard County, they actually think of Howard County's vision being Columbia's vision. And it's just now started really shifting to where the whole county is trying to really lean into this, because there's some parts of the western part of the county that are less developed where people have intentionally moved there because they don't want to be around people of different races. There are parts of the county that are like on the outskirts where it's intentional that I don't want to live around the people that are within that socioeconomic bracket. Not understanding that when you're talking about socioeconomic status, you're talking about race, you're talking about culture, you're talking about ethnicity. You can't untether them because America decided that it was going to tether them a long time ago. And so trying to make sure that people understand the complexity of that is really hard. A lot of times within this county, a lot of people will just pat themselves on their back because it is amazing. This place is amazing. And Howard County and Columbia and Elk Ridge and all other places are amazing. But there are so many things that go underneath the radar because it's really easy to just look at the AAA rating. And so there are disparities in things that we are okay with allowing to exist because they're not as front facing. And I think one thing that's beautiful about Howard County is that it's started to really look at those things. Okay, we've gotten this AAA rating. What are the things that we need to look at and shift and change and alter? And one thing I can say that I've been able to be a part of, besides like just genuinely leaning into the youth engagement with like the county, like the school system and county government really coming together to make sure that the resources are where they need to be. But even just creating work groups and commissions that are specifically meant as task force to handle certain issues. So like I have the honor of being the staff person on the county side for the LGBT plus work group. And the intention of the work group was an executive order to make sure that we're looking at the county's practices, whether it be structural, cultural, or from an individual level, that we need to shift so that people within the LGBT community can live their best life. And so like, we make sure that the people that are in the community, that have been fighting for the community, that are the change makers and the ones who actually need to be at the table are there. And then the resources from the county are support. Okay, so we're creating this space so that we can actually make this change. We're creating events so that people can know more information about what they don't know. At the end of this, writing a report to say to the county executive, these are things that need to change. These are the things that continue. These are things that need to stop. And so there's like the ability to be able to define for this community what actually is next. How can we make sure that we're still honoring? Because no matter what, things are going to continue to change. We're going to always need to revamp what it is that we're doing, how we're interacting with each other. Because you get two people in a room and that's diversity. And in order to have inclusion, you need to be willing to have the conversation to decide and figure out, okay, so what do we need to make sure that everyone has at their disposal so that they're living in this equitable space that we like to talk about all the time, instead of just being a hot button word or just a hot button word.
Well, I think so you have that AAA rating, right? But that doesn't mean that has to be enough.
Exactly.
Part of the human condition, right, is always like growth and trying to do your best. And so, and I think that you're absolutely right, because we've seen it in schools, like we've seen it like you see it in products, like you see it everywhere. There could be really great ratings, but there's still legitimate stories of struggle. There's still legitimate stories of people, of human beings whose needs have not been met. And so, and I think that's part of, I think our journey, right, on this earth is to continue to strive to be better and to be more inclusive. And I love the way that you broke down, like we look at the structure, we look at the culture, and we look at the individual. And how do we ensure then that each of our groups of difference are all receiving what it is that they need? When was Columbia, Maryland, when was the idea of this community? Like when was it created?
I want to say the 60s.
Okay.
When it was created. But like if you look up Columbia, Maryland. The gentleman that created it was Jim Rouse. And so what he did, the western part of Maryland, like that area, he bought up like a lot of the farmland from people. And then they had developers come in and they mapped out what they wanted to do. But like intentionally, he was from Hawaii and his parents died when he was really young. He went to live with a relative and he just lived somewhere where there were mad different people. And there were not, on the mainland, there weren't the same aspects of race and stuff like that that he experienced when he was in Hawaii. So when he came here, he wanted to create a space that was like that. White gentleman decided to link up with a whole bunch of other like influential people. They bought up land and then they went through and created that structure. Now, something that's interesting because time and refinement, just like we're talking about right now, so this actually kind of connects. There's no such thing as perfection.
Right.
And so if you can have the ability to have the awareness that you need in order to continually refine yourself and not feel bad or weird about it, then like you'll, I think, be at that space that you want to be at where you're honoring people. And so I think that was a continual process that was happening of like refinement. And unfortunately, people pass away, visions change, and something that I think a lot of people are combating right now, even if it isn't like at the forefront of people's mind, is Columbia is a very desirable place for people to live. It's a bedroom community between DC and Baltimore. Property value is sky high, has one of the best school systems in the United States. And so the original vision of Columbia, and if we're by extension, if we're going to say Howard County, is, to make sure that people of all different backgrounds can truly live and connect to the Howard County Columbia dream. Then like, what's up with affordable housing? Then what's up with like the vision that we have of inviting people in just as much as loving the people that are here? What's up with the smaller pockets of communities that have been undermined for larger portions of time? And those are the things that, like I said, are really cool because we have the opportunity to really lean into that right now. And I feel like from what I've seen, I've been in county government, in Howard County government for about 5-ish years under 2 different county executives, and under both, the vision and commitment to like refinement was always there. And so like that's important to me. Sometimes, of course, like I said, I don't like structure. I feel like within systems, there are times where I'm like, I understand that we have to do this because of this random thing that says it, but like you and I and everyone else in this room knows that we literally can solve this problem by doing X, Y, and Z. And so sometimes it's hard not to feel angsty in the space where you're within systems in that way, and like you can see the solution really quickly. But maybe you're not allowed to talk to the person because of hierarchy, or you can't necessarily do this because you can't use county funds to X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Right? Stuff like that. But again, I truly enjoy being able to utilize my skills in the structure that I am and like expanding on what I've learned. It's been like a really cool life-changing experience. And I don't think that I would be as equipped to go in the different spaces because I've had the opportunity with consulting to travel so many places that I never thought I would go. And to connect and to understand systems fundamentally better than I did before. But yeah, I would say if anything though, even with saying all of that, those amazing things, my favorite spaces to work in are just with school communities, with parents, faculty, staff, and teachers, because it's the microcosm of the United States and the collective community or the surrounding area. And so you can literally touch every space that you need for people to collectively just have that shared language, shared understanding of how they want to honor each other's dignity in the community. And like, you can really do some cool things when you have a cohort or a group of people, a community of people that are agreeing that this is how we're going to treat each other. It's going to be hard for us to get to the space that we want to, but we are all in. I truly appreciate the ability to do that.
Well, and I think part of that is that there's so much, so number one, the youth, right? So you're getting in with the youth. So there's, and the impact, the potential impact for change, that's like generational. But then you also, with teachers and school staff, that's also the youth, because they are going to impact the youth
over and over and over and over again.
It's generational work. It's generational impact. Okay, I have a couple of things that are kind of like disconnected before we leave because we have 10 minutes left. Can you please, I'm gonna zoom us out and I want to hear about your sweatshirt.
Oh yeah. So it says mobilize. And actually this is a Black owned business. I try to support local owned Black owned businesses around the area. And vulnerability. I've always loved like just pastel colors and stuff like that. People try to tell you that it means something if you do. And so as I've gotten older, I've really leaned into that, like Tiffany green or coral green. Pink looks really good on my skin tone, and light blue. And then I wanted to wear this today on purpose, actually. It says mobilize because I think that it says actually mobilize, keep moving. And I think it's really easy for us to essentially just be happy with the status quo. Election happened. A lot of people were happy about that. They, I think, internalized the fact that we won. But I think that the only we winning is if we're continually trying to hold people accountable for the things that we know we need to fix. Excuse me, if we're continuing to refine ourselves and make sure that we are the people we want our children and our future generations to look back on and say, you know what, our ancestors did that. They shifted the narrative. They changed something. And I definitely want to do that. I want to look back. I want to be able to, in my essence, in my spirit, look down and be like, I made y'all proud. I set a foundation that was actually something good.
Keep going. What does it say? Keep moving. Keep moving.
Exactly. Keep it moving. Mobilize. Keep it moving.
Keep moving. Okay, so I want to go back to something you say that you had said. So did you share that even though like you're in a different space socioeconomically, you're still broke?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk. What is that about?
Being broke?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So debt and coming out. So the only reason I've even gotten to the place that I'm at, I had to go to college. First person in my family to go to a 4-year college. That meant being automatically in debt as soon as I get out of college. There was I got a couple of scholarships the first year for academics, but after that Parent Plus loan and then having to take out private loans and then paying back loans while you're in college, like that was my reality. And so what I mean by broke is like when I was in college, I got there. My mom was proud of me. She did everything that she could to get me there. And then it was like, okay, so now that you're here, you need to do what you need to do to stay in. Like I can do what I can do only so much. And so it's having a job, working, trying to make things. That's also probably goes into like that work ethic thing. I'm just used to going constantly. But then there's also the fact that like I'm living paycheck to paycheck. And so when I say broke, that's more so what I mean, I guess. And my mom growing up, that was always our reality of like, all right, got to rob Peter to pay Paul, or I can't do this here because we got to make sure we have enough money here. And the fact that like, I look back now and it's like, okay, I make more money than my mom definitely made when she was, when she had me. But yet times changed. That was 10, 20 years ago, right? And so now we're at with like how much I make and what I do. There are times where I feel like they're not comparable. That doesn't make sense. Like I'm constantly told like, oh my God, you're amazing. You're going to be famous. The work that you do, all this stuff. I deflect compliments. I try to take them in genuinely, but all that stuff actually doesn't register in my mind when you recognize that you aren't actually getting paid your worth sometimes.
Yeah, the value.
Exactly. And so the broke thing, it's like, I love what I do. I couldn't see myself doing anything else, but that does not mean that I'm not consistently trying to find a way to actually get myself and my family out of this perpetual cycle where we have nothing to pass on intergenerationally, where we're living paycheck to paycheck, and one accident or one hiccup could literally set me back or make me homeless. And like, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's a wild thought to think about.
Yeah.
When you're helping other people get access to resources, or it's wild to think about when it's like, like my electric is late, but yet you're doing things that are helping people also get connected so that their electricity doesn't get cut off. And it's like, it's just a weird dynamic. Also, like I said, Howard County in general and Columbia are really expensive. I work there, but I can't live there. It's too expensive. And so like there are all these things that like they don't make sense when you logically add up, when you have conversations, when you're connected. The reality of the situation is I know I work hard enough. I know that I'm intelligent enough. And I've been continually told that. But the reality adds up to I'm still living paycheck to paycheck. Still a broke boy. Like that's the best way I can put it. And like I hate money. And I just don't want to have to worry about, you know what, if my glasses break, I don't need to not pay rent or be late on rent. If my mom needs help because something happened to her, I can help her without having to decide if I'm going to pay a car payment or if I'm going to ask for an extension on something. And then all through all of that, still having to pay someone money and I'm not getting anything, but it was for my education. So I should be happy. And it's just a weird dynamic.
I will tell you, so I went to go see this woman that did this. She did a Chinese zodiac reading of me. And so I was very much in the same space that you are regarding the value. And like knowing, and I was actually bringing in millions of dollars in funding. So like I was generating millions of dollars of service programs of, right? But one of the things she told me, and so when she said it, it hurt for a very long time. But then I was like, no, I'm shifting this. But one of the things that she told me was that one of my stars in my birth chart, I have in my money sector, I have what's called heaven's tears. And she told me that the impact of my work and what I got paid were so unaligned that even God cried for me. And like that, it hurt because I knew that it was true. But I have, so since that was about 2 years ago, I have intentionally been doing things differently and seeing things differently to change that. And I think that part of like that, it's a mind component. And very fortunately, like I am in a space of making that change that you're talking about, where it's no longer that paycheck by paycheck and also like the debt. I'm this year I like focusing on paying off debt, which was huge, but it's been a shift here. And it's something that I think is really important. And I think that it's a space and an area of growth for you, because that concept and like even saying I hate money, like there's some work in there for you to do. There's that's your space of work, because everything that you want regarding the value, like it's there, but you have to, there's some changes that need to happen.
Definitely. Always changes, no matter what. But I really appreciate that because that gives me something more central to focus on.
Oh, absolutely. Because like generational wealth is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I marvel sometimes because I've been able to make the shift, but it took me doing things like leaving the comfort and security of working at the county. like leaving some things, and like, so there were some things that I had to do, but I had to make this shift. And now, you know, I never would have believed that I would be making the money that I make.
That's also another wild thing, because I think about that even now, like how much money I make now. It wasn't that long ago that I was like, yo, like, I don't think I'll ever make that much money. And it's like a genuine shift. So like there has been multiple iterations, I think, of me feeling valued and having to shift and figure out what that looks like differently. For me now, it's just been, I think, I've been in a different space. Like I've got like the amount of, I think, value or credibility people have put in on the work that I do is just drastically changed since the last time I revisited the conversation. And so now I have, I think, a little bit more wiggle room to really recognize like this. I don't know if this is everything I want right now, and like shifting and figuring out what that means. the money that I hate money thing, I've definitely thought about that and given it work. It's more so what money signifies and does for and to people.
But that's not you.
Oh yeah, definitely not. But like, unfortunately, I don't want to play the game, and I know that you have to play
And
the
you do
game.
not have to, but you don't have to own that, because there's all of that. Like, there's a lot of judgment. You need to take the judgment out of it. That's the thing.
True story. True story. True story.
Is because even that's about people. It's not about money. It's about people, and
Very
it's about motivations. The money, it's just a thing. It's like this pen. You know, it's about the people, not about the thing. And so that's why that shift needs to happen, because this, my friend, the energy that you're putting towards something.
Oh yeah.
This, but remember, it's not the thing. We need to finish this conversation because I have some advice for you, but our time is up. So
I'm always down for a good conversation.
I need to get on your busy calendar so that we can have this combo and break some stuff down. But Definitely. What I know is that if you are mira, you already know your value. There is no monetary value for who you are and the impact and the way that people's lives and their children's lives and their children's children's lives will be changed because of what you've done and who you are. And so I think you know that to be true. So there's just some shifting, I think, in that next part. I'm so grateful that you were able to come on and make time to chat with me.
Thank you for having me. Seriously, I appreciate the platform and just being able to even have space to talk about, because sometimes it's not as free form. Mm-hmm. And I don't get a chance to talk about myself that often, so I appreciate it.
It's just a time to be. So we're going to say good night to everybody, and we will see you on Wednesday. So have a great night. Know that you are loved and you are cared for always. Bye-bye.